Greetings, my friends. Father Leo here again on this weekend of August the 6th and 7th. And in our liturgy today, we're celebrating the feast of the Transfiguration of Jesus. Now, just to set the stage here, and then how that gives me a background for what I want to talk about. And it is the Transfiguration where Jesus and his friends go up to a mountain. And anytime the Bible says something's going to happen on a mountain, you know it's going to be something extraordinary. Extraordinary. So here they are on the mountain, and Jesus is transfigured before them. And what is it? It talks about a lamp shining in a dark place. In other words, there's a radiant light that shines. And it's so bright and overwhelming that the three friends of Jesus fall on their knees because they're frightened. But Jesus is transformed because the Christ light, somehow he had a mystical experience. And in that mystical experience, the Christ, the light of the world, broke through and shone around him and from within him, and it overwhelmed them. And of course, Jesus told them, when you go back down from the mountain, don't tell anybody about the vision that you had here on the mountain. At least not now. Later, yes. But that's really important thing that I want to talk about this morning is the fact that the Christ, the cosmic Christ, was revealed, was manifested as a beautiful light shining from within and all around Jesus. A mystical experience. And it's just another instance of telling us that Christ is the light of the world, and the light is within all. All in all, St. Paul wrote. And God is embodied in all of creation, and all of creation is sacred. From the smallest to the largest, and everything in between is sacred. And what is particularly sacred is life itself, because life is what we're looking at here. The life of Mother Earth, the life of all that Mother Earth gives birth to, the greenery, the trees, flowers, the oceans. There we see the presence of the Christ, the presence of God, the divine presence, and animals and humans, provided our eyes have been opened. Provided. And if you remember, a few months ago, I spoke about the two ways of living a faith life. One is the fall redemption one, where atonement is the big thing. It's a big thing about sin, and it's anthropomorphic, means it's all about humans. All about humans. They're the top of the pile, if you will. But you see, in the last 50 years, things have shifted, a big shift. And part of that big shift is creation spirituality. And it has its beginning in the Big Bang, when the spirit becomes one with matter. And so all of matter is divinized. Divine is within all. And that helps us to see why we must combine religion and science. Combine religion and science. And today, if we see religion has really not caught up to that. Religion has never really bought into evolution, and that God is present all in all. All in all. And that's really critical. Now, the reason I give that background is because of the article in our city paper this week, and it says, the Examiner's view. Mental health crisis line must be done right. In other words, they're talking about that our federal government is going to establish, and I think it's November, a crisis line for people that are thinking of suicide. And then he starts out with a very, very bland statement. Some 12 people a day take their own life. Now, we don't know whether that's in our own city, in the province, across the country. It's not said where this happens. So it doesn't matter where, it's still a lot of people who somehow or another eventually reach that point of desperation where suicide seems like their only choice. Their only choice. And what the government is doing is setting up a crisis line. We have 911. Now they're going to have 988. So people contemplating or feeling desperate with mental illness can phone that crisis line, and there'll be somebody there to hear them, listen to them, empathetic listening, and hopefully that help to diffuse their state of mind, whatever it may be. Mental health. And that's another thing, of course. A couple things we don't talk about in polite company. First things we don't talk about very often is mental health. Now, we have hospitals set up which do wonderful work for physical health. Tremendous what they're able to do. We don't have hospitals set up for mental health, mental illness. And very often then we see that where there is a crisis line, then it has to be more than just a crisis line. There has to be mental health services. Mental health services. And when there are mental health services, then a person can be referred to one. In the present time, of course, if there was to be a referral, it could take months before a person could actually be connected to a mental health professional. And so there's that big gap is there, and it's there already. And if there's a crisis line, that the number of people calling are going to become more numerous, and more pressure on what mental health services that already exist. So if the government is going to put out that 988 number, crisis number, for people who are contemplating, thinking about, or feeling desperate and need to lead, and with mental health issues, they need to also invest a lot of money in having mental health services available at the very moment, and not 6 months or 2 years down the road. So this is, it's just a big gap. And I think there's more to it than that. It's what one of the popes called, I forget which one, that the time he was living in, there was what we call the culture of death. The culture of death. And you can easily see how the culture of death can flourish in the fall redemption paradigm. But when you move over into the more modern day paradigm, creation spirituality, and the presence of the Christ for 14 billion years in all of creation, that all of creation is sacred, then there won't be a culture of death. It'd be a culture of life, because there, in that creation spirituality, all of life is considered to be sacred. All of life, without exception. You take St. Francis of Assisi. He was a good exemplar of this. He not only preached to people, he preached to flowers, he preached to animals, he preached to birds, he talked with them. He saw the divine in all of creation, every aspect of it. And that's what the creation spirituality paradigm does. It opens people's eyes up to the bigger picture, which includes not only religion, but includes science as well. And so you have the divine, you have creation, and you have humans. That kind of and it's all interrelated. Relationships, all is one. All is one. And if you fracture one piece of it, you're fracturing the whole thing. And that's not understood by a lot of people. And so we have this culture of death. And we see that particularly in our country here. We see it, for example, that through our funding, through money, taxes, which you and I pay, we have a culture of death at the beginning of life and towards the end of life. At the beginning of life, there is the accessibility of abortion. Accessibility of abortion. And in the fall redemption model, abortion is something people can argue towards. In the creation spirituality one, since all is sacred, then pre-born babies are sacred. Their life is sacred. It is sacred. And it's no place for abortion. Now, that doesn't mean to say we pass judgment on people, women, who obtain an abortion. Of course not. That's their own personal choice, if you will. But somehow, ours is a culture of life, not a culture of death, a culture of life. From the very beginning, from the womb to the tomb, as we call it. And so abortion is something that, and I remember many years ago, some people came to me and said, we want to start a new organization called Birthright. And the idea was to offer help to people who became pregnant and didn't wish to be pregnant or give birth. And they offered all kinds of support. And many, a young woman or even an adult woman often, took advantage of the services offered by Birthright. And that's really important, that if a person becomes pregnant and they're kind of torn between giving birth and not giving birth, not being able to look after a child, maybe able to, whatever, that Birthright was there to offer support, moral support, spiritual support, material support, all that in order to help a person if they would choose to bring the baby to term. And that was a great big support for many, many people, Birthright. And the other end of it, of course, there's MAID. And you may have seen in the paper where a veteran experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder appealed to Veteran Affairs for help and got a notice back, couldn't help him at the present time, maybe he should consider MAID, medical aid in death, dying. And so, and we see how our government is broadening the boundaries, the accessibility for MAID. Again, it's all part of that culture of death, the culture of death. So we know that a lot of doctors are prepared and trained to offer pain control and the need of people to having the supports when they are approaching death, and not making MAID the only answer to dying, not the only answer. And again, it's a culture of life, a culture of life that's embraced within creation spirituality, which comes out of seeing the divine presence in all things, everything. Everything is of God. As Julian Norwich said, all is one. We're all interrelated, interconnected. Sally McFay wrote the book, Creation, the Body of God. So scientists are very far ahead on this, much farther ahead than most of our religion, much farther ahead. And our religion is lagging behind because our religion authorities, say our theologians, have not been studying and learning about science and putting together science and religion in order to be more a culture of life, a culture of life. And it's true, even though even today I say the culture of death, abortion, and MAID, and suicide, it's part of the human condition. And we bring empathy and compassion to those situations for everybody. Compassion, great compassion, but also providing what people need in order to bring a pregnancy to term, to birth, when they are experiencing mental illness and move towards contemplating suicide, that there are mental health services available to help them through this time in their life, even over a long period of time. Because obviously, if there's 12 suicides a day, whatever that must be across the province or across the country, I don't know. Doesn't say, should have. And suicide, mental health issues. And I think we need to see a time when there are hospitals for mental illness, not just a little unit in a hospital, but we have a big hospitals to treat physical ailments. There should be a big service for treating mental illness as well. And that's really the big thing, I think, that as citizens we need to promote with our politicians, to look at the big picture and do it from the perspective of a culture of life, which comes from creation spirituality, where religion and science come together, and where science is telling us that and about God's embodiment in all of creation, and religion honors that then we're able to see that all is sacred, and it would affect a lot of things, like war. No more war, no more violence. It would have a lot to do with our environment. At the present time, we see a culture of death there, with the fires and the droughts and the floods, a culture of death again, where people are so busy becoming rich, corporations or what have you, and even at the expense of the health of the earth. And so the earth also is very ill. And if you have a sick earth, you're going to have sick people, sick animals. You're going to have crop failures. So it's all tied together. It's all one. And that's something that the human race has really not come to see. And until the human race comes to see that, then it'll be fragmented. Piece here, piece there, but nothing really constructive and lasting. And so today, when I talk about the Transfiguration, it's a very important happening, and for us to recall it. Because on that occasion, the light of Christ burst forth from within Jesus and confounded the apostles who fell on their knees, frightened. But we all carry the Christ within us. Some of us know it, some of us don't. Some of us are conscious of it, some of us are not conscious. But for those who become conscious of it, it's to spread the word, try to be a light that spreads the word of the presence of the Christ, and that all is sacred. And if we can help to bring that into life, into our culture, that life is sacred because everything is sacred, then we'll have achieved a great work on behalf of God. Because don't forget, we are co-creators with God. And part of our job is to co-create. Co-create. That's part of creation spirituality, is to awaken us to the fact that we are co-creators with God. We have a job, we have a vocation, we have a ministry, if you will, to be awakened ourselves, to become aware, to see with new eyes, and then be a light. As Jesus was a light to the world of his day, so all of us who are enlightened need to be a light dispelling the darkness of our world. And part of the darkness of our world, of course, is that culture of death. The culture of death and the tremendous suffering, pain that's endured by so many people as a result of ignoring it or offering solutions that are not helpful. And that's kind of the call that I'm putting forth today, that we need to, when people ask for us to vote, ask them, where do you stand? Are you on the side of the culture of death or the culture of life? Do you see life as just to do what you want to with it? Or do you see that life is sacred and must be nurtured and cherished and protected in order they can thrive and flourish, whatever may be the circumstances? And, ask the questions. Too many of us believers are silent believers, and they're the worst kind. Never open their mouth, never speak their truth to power. We need to speak our truth to power. Have the courage to do so. And so that's my reflection here on this weekend when we celebrate the Transfiguration of Jesus. God bless you.